Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I apologize, I have not been doing regular broadcasts. I've been putting together this analytics apprenticeship program, so I've just been booked up doing that. But John reached out to me actually just last week, right?
Yeah, I think it was Sunday had the idea to do it.
So you guys are doing a new product or service launch?
Yeah, so last time I came on and talked with you, we were launching a boot camp that was a full-time program for students who were looking to launch their first job in data. We've actually gotten a ton of demand from the market for more of a part-time product that would be more flexible, so that folks who have a job can do night and evening work, but still kind of have that boot camp experience where there's a cohort, there's a team to hold you accountable. You get to know the instructors in a one-on-one relationship. And then at the end, where we can help facilitate potential job opportunities through our network and through recommendations. So we ended up deciding to pivot and do this part-time program, which we're kicking off in March. So hence wanting to chat with you a little bit about that and just how we can help folks get into a job this year.
Awesome. So you've broken it down into a 7-step roadmap for landing a job in 2022. You want to walk us through that roadmap? Yeah,
absolutely. So this we'll call it pretty straightforward, but not necessarily easy. Some of the steps are pretty quick, and then other ones require rolling up your sleeves and putting in a lot of work. So I'll quickly run through those 7 steps, and then we can break down each of those in a little bit more detail. So the first one is just having a plan, having a general roadmap for what your goal is, when you want to accomplish these things, and what the basic steps are along your journey. And again, we'll talk about specifically what that is later. The next is just understanding the data space, understanding what type of role you might want to get into. That will guide the future steps, what you decide to study, what are the skills you want to pick up. Then step 3, we have learning the actual tools that you're going to use in that specific role that you've chosen. And then we talk about learning how to think like a data person. So again, we can get into a lot more. There's a lot there to unpack. And that's actually a really valuable part of what people like us bring to the table. You know, it's not just the technical skills, it's the analytical framework and that critical thinking and rigor. Next, after you get that, we're going to talk about building a project portfolio. This comes in really handy when you're trying to market yourself and talk about your career experience. Then we'll really get into learning how to market yourself, how to network, how to find jobs. And the final stage is getting really good at the analyst interview. So like I said, it's pretty straightforward. If you can break down those steps and go through all of them, it's sort of this time-tested formula for breaking into our career, which is an awesome career, extremely rewarding, but that first job is usually really hard to get for people, right? And then after you get that first one and you have experience, it's a lot easier. So
I was actually talking to Shashank Kalanithi about this. So he's an analyst at Nordstrom. I think he's like a data analyst 2 or something. He was saying that there's a huge amount of competition for entry-level jobs, but then the opportunity and the demand opens up for mid to senior level and then analytics managers. So like it sounds like getting past that critical point of getting your foot in the space is a huge task. Do you have any advice on well, first of all, let's kind of break down what are the major challenges of getting that first job, and then how can you thwart those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think the hardest thing is, people want somebody who's been in the seat and knows how to do the job. Even for some of these junior roles, they're at least the picture of the person they think they want to hire has done this stuff before, right? So people are feeling like they're in that catch-22. I don't have any experience, so I can't get that job, but I can't get the experience, because I can't start a job.
It's chicken or the egg.
It's the chicken or the egg. And the biggest thing that we talk to people about is you really do need to have some hands-on experience with the tools. And ideally, you have some really robust projects that are nicely packaged up. You can walk through the project from, this is the high-level business challenge that I solved. These are the key insights. Maybe here's a nice data visualization to make it some eye candy. And then potentially, if you've got, depending on what you're using, is it SQL code behind it? Maybe it's Power BI with some advanced DAX code, like something technical that once you have people roped into this interesting business problem, insights and visualization, then show some technical skills there. When you can do something like that, it really helps an employer understand the value that you can bring to the table and what it might be like working with you on a project that's very similar to a work deliverable. So I think that's one of the biggest things, is just having those.
Yeah, and also what I'm seeing. So in Silvertone Analytics, my consulting firm, we're working with. Well, we just signed our first $1 billion client, which is 4 times bigger than our next size, but with that like medium to small size. So let's say 10 million up to 100 million. It's an interesting problem for these hiring managers because they're hiring for a talent or a business function that they don't understand. So it's like you're simultaneously being like interviewed and you're kind of in the subordinate position, but they're looking to you for your expertise. It's like this weird, it's kind of a paradox. Right now.
But even like that person, they may not know how to use Power BI or Tableau or whatever the tool is, of your analyst toolkit, but they would understand the business problem and they would understand the insights if you're able to communicate them well, and they could follow a data visualization story if you can do some good storytelling. So even that person who isn't necessarily technical could totally get the type of work that you can bring value with, if you can put it on display for them there. And that's actually the biggest reason that when we talk about putting together a really good portfolio product, a project of that you want to share with these employers, we always say, don't lead with the technical piece, right? Like everybody says, oh, I want my SQL or my Python. They want to impress with this really rigorous technical stuff. And it's just going to go just way over the head of some people. They're going to be super bored and not care about it. But if you can do it in the other direction, hook them with an interesting business problem, show the value in the insights, show a data viz, and then you flex your technical skills, it's a much more effective way to do it. And it really can appeal to a much broader audience if you can package it that way.
Right. And I think that this behavioral pattern comes from the assumption that you are getting this job for your technical knowledge. And I just had a call with Lee Feinberg, who is NYU professor that teaches Tableau. And he was saying that it's not that you are getting the job because you have the skill set. You're getting the job because you can solve problems. The skill set comes secondary. It's like the analogy that I just put out in one of the podcast episodes. Like we've been doing shorter form podcast episodes. If I'm hiring a contractor to build me a shed, I don't want to see a certification on how well he can swing a hammer. Show me some pictures of the sheds you built. Let me know your style. Let me know your overall effectiveness. I think people get hyper fixated on, using a screwdriver, using a tool, using XYZ thing. And it's like they're losing the forest for the trees. Like they're just hyper fixated on that. And I think that it's almost like you need to do a little bit of an empathy exercise of, hey, you're getting hired to do a job. Speak the jargon that this person, and speak from the level of detail of this person where they're at. So I often tell people, quantify whenever possible in dollars and cents. So you, instead of saying, oh yeah, we cleaned up the data using SQL, we did this data pool, we had a problem with the data model, you could say, Okay, well, we increased sales by $50,000.
Yep.
And then let them lead the conversation, because you said something that's kind of an emotional bid that's going to get them leaning forward a little bit, instead of you trying to like push out like, I know things, I know this, I know this, I know this. They might not care what you know technically.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, they're looking for impact, right? And that's the, there's a lot of people that can use the tools, that can extract data, that can spin up a chart. But the people that are really good and extremely valuable can do all those things, and they get the business problem. They know where to look for information. When they find valuable levers that can improve the business, they're great at communicating them. They're great at rallying people and advocating to take action based on those things. And that's when you start to get into people that can just be complete game changers for a business.
Right.
You know, they know what rocks to turn over. And then once they find the stuff, they really drive change, right? And think about that. Like, imagine the title of change driver versus data puller, right? Like if we made it that plain, it's obvious which one you want to be. And it's easier said than done, but that's the goal for people like us.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we've been neglecting the chat, so welcome. So Arena, a junior analyst, thanks for joining us. We got Robert Robinson, Dina, Fayez. Man, we've got a bunch of people in the chat. Also, Dan. So Dan Sanchez, a real challenge is figuring out which tools to learn and practice. Excel, SQL, R, Python, Tableau, Power BI. It's not worth mastering all of these when most analyst positions require 2 to 3.
Yeah, awesome. I'd say, Dan, if you want to chat again, like what kind of a role are you looking for? Are you going for data analyst? Do you want to be a data scientist? Maybe you want to be a data engineer. You know, that's sort of that first question is understanding which of the different flavors of role you're gunning for. And there's definitely overlap between those three in terms of some of the skills that you want to learn, but then there's also some slight differences there too. So, you know, for example, if you want to be a data scientist or a data engineer, you probably need Python, right? Versus if you just want to be a data analyst, you know, business intelligence analyst, Python can still be really valuable, and it has some great applications, but I would put it lower on the list than I would for those other two roles, where I'd say, you know, put it very high on the list. SQL is really actually pretty valuable across all three. That's my personal passion area. It's kind of where I focus my teaching. It's what I do on the job every day for over a decade, and I love it. And I think it's also really valuable because if you're an analyst, you need to be able to extract data. A lot of times it's in a relational database, and you need SQL to get it. And then same story with data scientists. You want to be self-serve, not waiting for someone to give you the information that you'll need. And then you know, a data engineer, it's absolutely critical too. So I think SQL runs across all of them. I think, you know, Power BI and Tableau, fantastic on the data analyst side, BI analyst. I think as a data scientist, it can still be a nice to have. I'd put it a little lower on the list after, you know, Python, R, SQL. So it's, you know, so I think that's really the first question, Dan, is what are you trying to grow into? Understand kind of the right tools for that specific role, and then prioritize the things that you're gunning for.
Well, see, what I think is interesting too is that, so the first thing is make a plan. So what I tell people is go find 3 of your ideal entry-level jobs. Go down to the skills section. There's your blueprint right there. Copy paste that into a Google Doc. Yep. Another level of nuance, though, is do you want to work for a big or a small company?
Yep.
Because it's funny you say SQL. I am SQL illiterate. I do not know SQL. But most of my clients, so the counter is that $1 billion company. So they had a data architect completely build out an entire warehouse. So all we did was come in and build out the Tableau infrastructure on top of that. Yep. But I would say 95% of my clients in that medium to small market, they're pulling data out of ERP systems or CRM systems into Excel, and then I can connect Tableau or Power BI to an Excel file. And then we can even automate the update in that it can just push out an updated file to a specific save location, and then you just set a scheduled refresh in Tableau or Power BI, and it'll just automatically update. So there are ways around SQL, but I think your advice though of learning SQL is probably pretty good. I should probably take one of your courses.
Yeah, and I started my career on the consulting side as well, and I at that point I'd never touched SQL, and I never really needed it. It's kind of same idea. I was really heavy in Excel. I was using tools like Omniture, which is now Adobe Site Catalyst, like things like that for clients, and we would do a ton of work largely in Excel. And then when I started to really get into SQL was when I went in-house for a large company. And that was it was like a data playground. It's like if you can use a SQL database, you can get marketing data, website data, manufacturing data, cost of goods sold stuff, like you're getting customer satisfaction surveys, just everything was in this central repository. And I didn't have to wait for anybody to give me information for any kind of analysis I wanted to do to help the business. And I think that's the thing that SQL unlocks is this if you have access to it, you can answer any question you want. So I think it's a really powerful one. And yeah, would love to see you in one of the courses someday, John.
All right. So Mark's asking, what's the roadmap from novice? So no, I don't know what KSA is short for in data to getting hired as a business analyst. So yeah, I think like mapping out this process distinctly would be really valuable.
Yeah. So let's kind of talk through that. So this is that 7-step process that we talked about. So the first one, making a plan. I think the biggest thing I want to say is don't spend more than an hour on this. Like we, as analytical people, we tend to overthink things, have analysis paralysis. What you want to do is have some kind of a logical progression that you can follow to start acquiring skills, to be going generally in the right direction, and know that along the way, you're going to learn some other things. You're going to pivot. So just don't get stuck just thinking forever. Put something down on paper and then start going within the next hour. That's I think the biggest thing.
Another way of saying that might be just pick a direction or pick a lane.
Yep, exactly. And then so from there, I think like Dan's question previously, we want you to start thinking about what type of person are you trying to be? A data analyst? Are you trying to be a data scientist, a data engineer? And then based on that, decide which tools you want to go for. After that, then we're going to start getting into actually learning these tools. And what I would say here is as you're at this step 3, learning the tools, you want to keep in mind steps 4 and step 5 at the same time and kind of tackle them all in parallel. So what I've got for step 4 is learn how to think like an analyst. And then step 5 is build a comprehensive project portfolio, which you're going to use to market yourself to employers.
Wait, can I pause you right here?
Yeah.
So I'm teaching 2 classes right now at Greensboro College. So I'm teaching the capstone course where I get to pair the students with one of my consulting clients, and actually a digital marketing class. And there's kind of a lot of overlap there. One of my students found who we're going to be partnering with on this consulting engagement, applied for an internship there. So I have essentially a student on the inside of this company that we're going to be working with. So last semester in my case studies course, we built out Tableau public portfolios. Guess what he did in the interview? He brought his laptop, pulled it up, right? And said, oh yeah, so here's how I think about studying this Google Ads data. Yep. So we were trying to optimize on cost per click because we didn't have any conversions. And this is a proxy metric because, ideally you want your marketing tied back to, blah, 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 blah. But he said that after he got the interview and accepted, they were like, you were our number 1 pick by far for this internship position.
Awesome.
So like the power of having something to point to, it's so much more powerful saying, hey, here's what I've done than let me tell you about a time I did X.
Yep. And think about like this can come into play with the portfolio of projects from as you're networking and applying to the actual interview, like you're saying there. Think about somebody who's applying and just has on a resume, I'm great at Excel, SQL, and Power BI, right? It's just a few words on a resume. It's not super concrete. It's how great is this person really is kind of the question that anyone receiving this, because they've seen it a ton, is asking, versus like your student being able to say, hey, here's check out my Tableau public, specifically this project. It's super relevant to your business. Just that's a slam dunk, right? And it does set you apart. It makes them want to have that interview. Gives them a sense for what your work is going to be like. And that's what people want to know. They want to see that you can do the job. When people are saying, I want 2 years of experience, that's not really what they want. They don't care about the years. They care about the ability to do the work. And we just are really bad with job descriptions, and 2 years of experience is our best proxy for we think you can do the work, So
right. And that kind of gets back to that conversation around the hiring managers may not know what they're doing. So, and this is like a very tactical piece of advice. So actually, when I was in that meeting with the president of that company lining up the project for the students, we got to talking about culture, and he kind of had this anecdote about, yeah, well, I actually just heard this story about there was a research department at some university and only white males were hired there. And then they got the accusation levied at them that, oh, this is discriminatory practices. And then they went back and they were like, no, we promise we're not just like weeding for this. They found that only white males applied for their positions. And then what they did was they did a whole research study as to why. Yeah. So let's say they had 5 core pieces of acumen you had to pass. They did a study that if, as a white male, if I had 1 out of the 5, I'm going to apply. To where like people who might be minorities or women, they didn't have 4 out of the 5. They weeded themselves out of the candidate pool. So I think that this is when it comes to applying for jobs, err on the side of asking for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah, shoot your shot.
Shoot your shot. Yeah,
we always say that. If you feel like you have some of the description and you think you could pick up the other stuff and you would be valuable in this role, take that shot. It doesn't hurt you in any way. A lot of times you're going to get a no just because it's really competitive, especially for your first job. But why not? What are you risking?
Well, let's frame it up this way. You can't get a yes if you don't ask.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So sorry, that was a whole tangent, but I think it was a juicy one. So getting back to Elijah is asking, I just finished my desktop specialist certification, but I'm now looking to build out that portfolio. So are there any projects or problems that you would advise him showcasing?
Yeah, awesome. So first, Python, SQL, Tableau, that's a great stack. Whether you want to be potentially data scientist, you might want to add R to that too, just for your flexibility. If you want to be a data analyst, this is great. Maybe you play around with Power BI a little bit too, just because they're sort of the other half of the market from Tableau. But awesome start, Elijah, with this stack. Like, this is a very hireable stack of tools. In terms of where you can get projects, I would say, what are you personally excited about digging into, and go find data sets on that, and just start answering questions, whether that's business questions, things about the environment. So there's a whole bunch of places that are great for that. Kaggle has an enormous amount of data they'll give you for free. Data.world has an enormous amount of data they'll give you for free. If those feel overwhelming because you don't know what to search for, we at Maven Analytics, we have a place we call the Data Playground. It's much more curated. It's sort of geared towards beginner to intermediate analysts. You basically download a CSV. It has a description of the data, and it has a series of analysis recommendations. So if you're spinning your wheels on the bigger places, you might want to go towards Maven's Data Playground. But just get in there, start digging into it, ask questions that you're interested in answering with the data, pull out those insights, get good at communicating the questions you asked, the learnings that you found. Use Tableau to put together those data visualizations, because it's eye candy. It makes people stop on it and take a look.
And it's so easy. You just click the mouse twice, and then all of a sudden you have a very visually, aesthetically pleasing.
So it's the eye candy, and it's a genuinely valuable skill to be able to present your data visually. It's so much more impactful when you can tell the story with charts and graphs compared to just throwing up a quick little set of numbers that we're just much better at processing data visually. So
I've actually got a comment to kind of piggyback off of that. But before we get into this comment, that student that had flipped up his interview in an interview, flipped up his portfolio in an interview, he actually was on one of the sports teams. And what we did was we walked through how to pull out sports data from the Greensboro College website. And then he visualized his team's data. And then he talked about, what is maybe a strategy they can do. Maybe they need to practice on this aspect of the game because that's a weak spot for them. So it's showing that critical thinking ability, that you're using data to drive strategy. So if you can make your portfolio something personable to you, it's also a conduit for you to kind of get to know, like, not only are you showing the technical, but you're also combining the kind of the person behind the skill set as well.
Yep. Absolutely.
But Jarvis was asking, what's the best way to present Power BI dashboards within Power BI in themes or customized Power BI design? I'm going to kind of rephrase this a little bit. What do you think of, or how do you frame up visualizing data? Are there some best practices that you guys follow over at Maven?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the key thing here is probably to take the context. If you're, I want to answer his question pretty well first. So if say you're in an interview, if you can bring your machine and fire up Power BI desktop and demonstrate this to them real time, maybe you're presenting on a screen, maybe you're showing your computer, that's fantastic, right? It's extremely interactive. You can go much deeper than kind of with PowerPoint. Taking screenshots of your dashboards, and putting it into a PowerPoint, the benefit there is you can stay very focused and you can put together a nice linear train of thought if you have certain insights and a certain story that you want to tell. And it sort of forces you to stay on that linear thinking. So, I think that's really kind of a matter of preference. Tableau Public has the fantastic ability to create a project portfolio. Power BI doesn't really have a version of that today, and it's we wish
it's a bummer.
Yeah, and honestly, hosting a broader portfolio that's outside of just Tableau, there isn't a great solution in the marketplace for it. And it's funny how anybody that you talk to is saying the same thing that we're saying right now. You really need to have a great portfolio to talk about your projects, but nobody's built an awesome solution for that specifically for analysts. So, I think that's probably coming soon from somebody, pretty soon. But
I have seen some people build out personal websites.
Yep.
And for example, I think you can embed a Power BI dashboard in iframe, but you've got to learn HTML code. Although that might actually be just another opportunity for you to say, hey, I'm resourceful and I execute and I figure things out. There was no solution for this, so I made a solution. I think that just kind of was actually something that this person, Nikolish, so he wanted to ask, can you throw some light on how to improve problem solving and soft skills? So I think that what I just kind of demonstrated was exactly that. So if there's a problem that you're facing and you can articulate in an interview, hey, I was facing this problem, here's what I did, and here's the output. So and on top of that, it's even better because it's like, not only am I telling you about it, here's the output that I created.
Yeah, definitely. And this is one of those things too, that this is a little harder to pick up, and for it, for this stuff to become intuitive, it sort of happens over time. And a lot of times the learning that you do is very focused on the tools. So I think one of the things that you want to do is, as you're going through learning all these various tools, try to find training that also really teaches with sort of real world simulated business problems as much as possible, because that kind of helps you develop thinking about things like, what are the right metrics to use in this situation? How would I judge success? What am I looking to do? Improve revenue, reduce cost, speed up time to market, things like that. So the more you can do projects that are really relevant, this stuff, critical thinking, using the right metrics, how to present findings, it all kind of becomes more intuitive over time. And I think it's just, the key is working on the right stuff and building a little bit of experience there. It's hard there,
Yeah, critical thinking is tough. And as a professor, I'm realizing this is something I don't know if you can scale critical thinking training. You know, like it's like you, because I don't have a solution for developing critical thinking. I mean, there's not like a take this one course, because then it's like, no, well, you're just following the steps that someone else has laid out.
Yep.
Like, I guess what it is go out and solve problems that no one has solved. That kind of you're getting beyond the stake or the pale and out into new territory. That's how you develop critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
I don't think you can tell someone, hey, do this, because then it's like you've immediately broken the whole concept.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, you can teach certain things like look out for bias, look out for different pitfalls and caveats and things like that. But totally, I think to really get good at it, you kind of need to be off on your own and building some new muscles.
All right. So which of the 7 roadmap points do you want to talk about next?
Yeah, where did we get to? I feel like
yeah, we're all over the place. But I mean, we've been working the conversation, the chat log in.
No, these are great questions people have. Yeah, so I think probably good. We kind of talked a lot about the portfolio projects. It's probably we haven't spent much time on the kind of the end of the journey, which is figuring out how to market yourself and figuring out how to nail the interview. So maybe that would be a good thing to talk about now. We encourage people for step 1, when you're thinking about putting yourself out there, it's not the resume, it's the LinkedIn public profile first. And the resume is super important, and you obviously have to do it. You're probably not getting hired without submitting a resume at some point, so you need to check that box. But but same is true for your LinkedIn profile. At some point during that hiring process, whether this is how you actually got discovered by the recruiter, or whether the recruiter is interested in you because you've applied and they want to do a little quick background check on you to see, does this person really kind of pass the smell test? They're going to do a search for your name, probably in Google, probably in LinkedIn. And the goal there is you really want to look like a data person when they hit that page. So, you want to have some kind of a title that seems relevant. You want to, any of the experience you have, you want to talk about specific aspects of any of those jobs in a way that seems like, oh yeah, I get why he or she thinks they're an analyst. They did pretty relevant work here. So you want to be able to pass that smell test. So we talk about that as sort of like your first stop in tackling that there. Does that?
So LinkedIn is kind of like your homepage.
We think so. We think that is your professional digital resume, and people are likely going to see that before they really scrutinize your resume.
Right. Well, also too, I mean, I think I love that analogy, because I was just talking with my friend Molly, who I helped get her first entry-level data science job. And what's interesting is that she kind of got hired before she had the skill set, and she's developed that skill set, and now she's gaining more confident. I mean, that's such a wonderful kind of hack. Like, instead of going and diving into all of these courses, just sell yourself. Like the reason she got this job was that she explained to them, I think they asked, like, tell me about a time you solved a problem. She was like, oh, well, I actually needed to change my brake pads, and I looked up YouTube how to do that, and I followed all the steps and did it myself. So it's like, oh, you don't necessarily have day one the skills we want, but you have the ability to acquire new skills. And I think broadcasting that out in an interview is really important. But I brought her up to say that what I've noticed is she started improving her LinkedIn page, and she's starting to show up in search results.
Yeah.
So like, she is a data scientist and has a degree in environmental science.
Yep.
That brand stack is very unique. I don't think there are a ton of people with that skill set. So if you can kind of niche down, you might start to get opportunities coming to you once you start building out that personal brand online.
Yeah, especially if there's something that you're really passionate about, it can be great. Like, we know some people that have branded themselves as healthcare analyst, or whatever else that you think really gets you excited. in addition to just data, that can really help. And it's interesting. You said, it's just go out there and sell yourself. Like this is something we did with our previous boot camp. As soon as we started teaching the courses and the technical skills, we started teaching them how to market themselves in parallel, because if you want to get this job, you need to get the skills and you do have to learn how to sell yourself. And if just one of them is not going to cut it today, so we started doing LinkedIn profile reviews early. We started doing resume reviews. We got them to understand what a good project portfolio looks like so they could start sharing that publicly and kind of building that brand. So you definitely do have to know how to sell yourself if you want to get into this career.
Yeah. I think a lot of people struggle with that, of like how to effectively talk about yourself. Is that something you guys have talked about? How to effectively, well, I guess you talked about how to communicate the past projects, but
Yep.
How do you advise people on answering the question, well, tell us about yourself, for example?
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think we typically, which that question comes up all the time, right?
It's a tough one. It's so open-ended. It's like, well, you could go in so many different directions. So yeah, I don't know I'm curious your thoughts on how you think through that.
Yeah. So I typically, the way I talk to people about interviewing is figure out what are the stories that you really want to tell. So like, maybe that's the time you learned how to change brake pads. Maybe it's a really fun project that you did with Tableau Public, but figure out, what do you think are your best possible stories?
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever the question is, quick chit chat on the question and pivot it into telling the stories, that you really want, right? Like, so with tell us about yourselves, it could be a quick little, this is my background. I studied this, and now I'm really fired up about data analysis, and I've been hitting it hard. Like, I'm learning Excel, I'm learning SQL, I'm learning Power BI. Like, this is all I'm doing right now, and just be able to pivot any conversation into those 3 or 4 stories that you want to come out and really paint you in the best light. And that's a skill too.
John, the thought has occurred to me. What if I just put you on the spot right now? John Pauler, tell me about yourself.
Yeah. So, grew up in a small town and yada, yada, yada. And now I'm really fired up about learning data analysis. And I'm spending all my time, that's basically how I would approach that in an interview.
So you rooted down on kind of where you came from, what you're doing now. So yeah, I'm totally throwing you on the spot.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, that is basically the formula though, that I often recommend to people, is getting comfortable with that. Like, how's the weather over there? How do you take that and pivot it into what you actually want to talk about? Because that's what they really want to know, is just, are you good for this role? And mm-hmm. Are you a person that's going to be really successful? And it's kind of your job to steer that conversation in the direction that best does that.
What do you think about like developing almost like a tagline or an elevator pitch?
I think that could be great, and I've seen a few people do that really well recently. So like Clay Cooper is one of the guys we really like in the data community, and he was the pharmacist that was reinventing himself as a data analyst. And the awesome thing about Clay is he didn't wait until he had all the skills to start putting himself out there. He kind of did it day one. He said, like, this, I'm doing this now. I haven't done it yet, but I'm starting. He started sharing his work. He started learning. And he started putting out these great dashboards he was learning in Power BI. And everybody kind of got to know him as this career pharmacist who was making this transition, and you got to watch his story unfold. And the really cool thing about branding himself like that is somebody saw his work. They said, hey, I want to have coffee with you to talk about this cool stuff that you're doing. And that person ended up giving him a job a couple months later. So I love that strategy.
Who's the prime example of this? Albert Bellamy.
Yeah.
I mean, he is like a tour de force out on just social media and LinkedIn, because he was transitioning from the military, got all involved in the veterans, and then kind of came on the podcast and started kind of building that. So it's like, I think that it's kind of those intersects of I have a very interesting story because it's like you don't hear about too many veterans who are
Yep.
into the data space. I mean, he had 3 job offers by the time that he was ready to take full-time employment and retire
Yep.
from the military. So, I mean, he is like a top 1%er. Like there's his knack for social media and making engagement. He's also got so much energy. Social media exhausts me a little bit. Like I would rather just do the core work, but he just like loves getting out on there. But getting back to the kind of tagline comment or thought, I think when I was like out networking back before, we had the entire world shut down and was like shaking hands and meeting people at networking events, I would say something a little funny or cutesy. They'd be like, "Oh, what do you do?" I'd be like, "Oh, I make picture books. I make picture books for adults." And in that, they're like, "What do you mean by that?" So I think that what I'm trying to kind of convey to the listeners is that you probably have a tendency to overshare or overexplain. If you can say something that's a little bit provocative, and it's not provocative like, I do some scandalous thing, but it's just like, what do you mean by that? And then they're leaning in, and then you're having a conversation, and it's not.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people will just talk. It's technical, and it's like they're reading the resume line by line by line. In an interview, you want to have a conversation because not only are you being tested on your technical acumen, but these people are going to have to work with you potentially 40 hours a week. So if you're that person who is just like wearing them out and you're an energy vampire, just be cognizant of that, and I think that they'll give you a little bit of a break or be a little bit kind in that a lot of people get nervous in interviews.
Yep.
So like they may not be like, oh, well, if he's this way in an interview, then this is how he's going to be day in and day out. But it's just something that I've seen as a recurring pattern.
Definitely. Yeah. We talk about the stuck in an airport test, right? Like, would it be fun to have this as your companion if you were stuck in an airport for 5 hours, or would this be a nightmare? Right. And that's a lot of times that has a major impact on the hiring decision.
Right. I feel like, did we cover point 4, learn how to think like a data person?
I sort of in one of the answers to the questions, but I'll talk about that a little bit more. Some of the things that I think you might want to hit there are like, get good at any kind of business problem you're trying to tackle. How do you think about what are the right metrics that you want to focus on? How would you think about defining them? How would you think about where do you source that information from?
Mm-hmm.
You want to think about how the mind processes information, and like earlier quickly touched on why charts and graphs are much better than just presenting data in tables. There's a tremendous amount of science behind that, and also some charts are better than others. So that could be an entire topic at some point in the future. But pick that as a topic to learn about. It can be amazingly valuable as you're trying to convey your insights. So those are just a couple of the examples of that. We talked about critical thinking. We talked about business acumen, how important those things are. We at Maven, we have a course that's called Thinking Like an Analyst, and we tried to gather a number of those skills and start to teach that framework. So it's this tool agnostic course that's really, it talks about measurement planning, talks about some of the Gestalt principles of data visualization. It talks about data prep and how you think about, holes in your data, potentially wild outliers that may be throwing things. So like all the unsexy caveating that we do before we really get into a project,
Mm-hmm.
So that can be one way, but I think really it's just working on really relevant projects that you can start to think, how would I tackle this problem? What are the things I need to look out for? What's kind of the output that might convince someone to take action? Those types of things I think are really important there.
Right. And I'll chime in here and kind of yes and add on to it. I've kind of developed this gamification framework. So when thinking through like what is the game that's being played, well, we could root down on marketing or sales. Okay, sales. Yeah. What's your scoreboard metric? What is the game that's being played, so to speak?
Yeah,
it's total sales. So you may just change that aggregation from sum to average, and you have deal size. So figure out what are your scoreboard metrics. I generally put them up on the top of the dashboard as the KPI cards. And then you have your combinations of metrics, which is quantitative data, with your dimensions, which add context to your quantitative data. And then that's where you start building out visualization. So that kind of crossroad there. So I think that thinking about it from like, what is the game that's being played? Because I think a lot of people lose focus, and they'll get hyper fixated on this one thing that might drive that scoreboard metric of total sales, 0.0001%, but they've spent 30 hours on that.
Yep.
And that's a liability from a hiring manager's perspective.
Yeah.
It's like, you're an asset to us. We need to make sure that you're focused and you're doing the work, the core work that's at hand here.
Yeah, and I'll even build on that analogy too. We talk a lot about scoreboard versus playing field, and so the scoreboard is kind of the end thing, like sales. That's what I want to go up, sales revenue, right? But sales revenue in its own, it's not a lever that you can pull, right? Versus like understanding the effectiveness of marketing channels, understanding the lead close rates of different sales reps, understanding the conversion rate of your website. Like that's the actual playing field that influences the points on the scoreboard. So I always love talking to people about that and really trying to be what I call a playing field analyst who's looking for those levers that you can pull to put more points on the board, and that's, you have to do it all.
That's awesome. I love that analogy. I mean, it's another way of putting that is like, what are your inputs versus your outputs?
Yep.
Like if you just focus on outputs, there's not really anything to be done. It's like, oh, well, this quarter we scored this much. Just focusing on that, it's like, well, okay, well, what's our game plan? What plays are we going to run? So yeah, I love that idea of we're just like building on top of these metaphors.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
and everybody gets fired up when they see the up and to the right scoreboard metric, the sales. I love seeing an analyst who's excited about trying to move tomorrow's sales number by finding those levers to pull. And that's the tremendous value you can get. So,
well, yeah. And what I think that involves though, is something that I think is very much underrepresented in this space. Everyone is focused on hard skills, like SQL, Python. I mean, look at the chat log here. We've got like all of these very specific number crunching tool sets.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what about business acumen? What about reading MBA case studies where it's like, all right, Dell just expanded in China. They have this problem with reaching this consumer base. What is the problem there? And I think that, well, maybe it could be that these people are just not as curious or interested. I'd actually be curious if people in the chat log, are you guys curious about solving business problems? Or are you guys more interested in kind of like data problems where, you're going out to the world and it's kind of like very statistics versus, because business acumen, it's just kind of theory. It's like there are so many unquantified unknowns that have pressure on your business. So I don't know. I mean, do you guys teach anything do you guys do much like business acumen?
Basically, through sort of real world case study courses, so for example, there's one of the SQL courses that I teach is it's based on an e-commerce company that sells some fuzzy teddy bears. And the whole goal through the launch of this business is open up new marketing channels, launch some new products, try to maximize margin, find places on the website that you can improve conversion rate. So it's like a super hands-on, you're learning some advanced SQL concepts, but at the same time, you're also learning these business concepts specifically for like a marketing analyst, product analyst, and e-commerce analyst. So that's sort of just one example of how we typically think. We try to teach it into the projects where you're learning the tools as much as we can. But I would say right now we don't really have like a strict business acumen course. You could think of actually part of the Thinking Like an Analyst course. We talk about measurement planning and how do you pick the right KPIs? How do you think about the stakeholders and what their motivations are so that you can try to influence those people with your data. So, I guess there's a few ways that we tackle that one.
Well, because it just occurred to me that I think the reason people struggle with marketing their skills is that they don't have a context in which to apply them.
Yeah. Yep.
So like if you understand, okay, I am a sales analyst, and by, you know, sending leads to these 3 people who are our Pareto analysis, these 3 people generate 80% of the sales. So we're going to be funneling our, you know, highest qualified leads that way, and that can increase our overall sales by 80%. So it's like those field metrics like that. And I think that maybe it's just hard to do. And I'm actually in the business school, so maybe I should start get cracking on that and start.
Yeah.
Well, because with the capstone course, it's like professor mode on easy mode, because they're going out and they're working on a real problem with this executive team, and it's like there's a certain level of discipline that I think exists within those projects that doesn't exist necessarily in the classroom. Because if you get the wrong answer on a test, it's like, all right, well, you went from an A to a B. But with these companies, it could be like, well, if we make the wrong decision here, that could be $100 million worth of lost opportunity.
Yep.
So getting excited about solving specific business problems and applying them, I think, will make marketing your overall skill set much easier.
Absolutely. You know, just to be able to say, like, I use this tool to do this thing for a business, you know, quantify I trimmed the marketing budget and we increased sales, is so much better than just saying, you know, I'm really good at Excel, or, you know, I'm really good at SQL, to put it into those serious business terms.
Yeah. Okay. So Deepak actually was one of our first students ever to take one of our learning courses on Learn at Silverstone. So he said, personally, I would say that I have not yet reached that level of understanding business side of data-related issues. I guess end of the day, this is what that actually keeps the customers coming back. So I realize I came about learning analytics in a very different environment than I think just about every other person I've taught, and that I went from my MBA with a concentration in analytics. I turned my last I turned my last internship into my first consulting client. And then instead of going and taking Udemy courses, I closed deals, and then that's how I expanded my business. And well, there was like a period in time where I was showing up in these meetings. I was like, I have no idea. And I would just not no idea. I would say I would know 80% of the project and then have to figure out that other 20%. And I think that this gets back to this concept of accountability. So with what you guys are doing, are there defined times where you're meeting? Because you said something about touch bases or accountability within your bootcamp program.
Yeah. So with the boot camp, basically students enroll. We set a curriculum for them over the course of this. It's a 6-month program. There's a weekly check-in that's live. If folks can't make the weekly check-ins, we do record it. And so, you know, we understand people. These are largely people that are working. A lot of them have families, so it's hard. I've been through an evening program myself in the past. Like I get it. So we have these check-ins. We set up a community Slack channel that's just for the boot camp, where you can kind of get help on the fly anytime you want it, and that's been really great for people in the cohort, working with instructors or working with each other, and sometimes getting each other unstuck with, oh yeah, I just had the same problem. Here you go. So we're holding people accountable to a specific schedule. We have them put together these projects that are, you know, like I said, very real world focused projects. The goal is for them to build the skills, get feedback from us on whether they're on track, whether they could do better. And at the end of the program, have a bunch of these projects that they have nicely packaged up. They're comfortable presenting to an employer. So that's kind of just like your student with Tableau Public. They can do the same thing, and they can present this in an interview, or even before the interview. They can throw something over to pitch themselves and help them get the interview. You know, so that's one of the things we work on.
Well, that's something that I'm actively starting to focus more on this semester. I mean, I saw this appalling statistic that something like 50% of those who graduated in 2020, 50% of them don't have full-time employment in kind of like a legitimate role. They're working at like Starbucks, or they're working part-time, or they're, I think that it's a massive hurdle right now. Like the getting your foot into whatever space. I mean, I don't think that this is a challenge that's unique to analytics. I think that this is happening kind of across the board. And I think what's happening is there's been a bloat in the higher education space. I mean, quite frankly, simple economics, I think they're pumping out more degrees than there's a supply for a lot of these positions.
And it's still crazy expensive at higher ed too. So it's it's becoming a tricky value prop.
Right. So what I've been telling people, kind of my go-to advice has been, I think you should get your analytics job and then have your company pay for a master's degree if that's the path you want to get.
Yeah.
Because I think, to be completely honest, in my MBA cohort, half of the students went directly from undergrad to grad school, and then half, like I had worked for, I think, 3 years. So I had a little bit more maturity. The students who went from undergrad to grad school, it was like this whole life of they were like in Peter Pan, Never Land.
Yeah.
It was like they were still in that like childlike mindset of, all right, well, I've got this assignment, I'm going to do it last minute. They weren't thinking about like, all right, what job is out there? What skill set? What do I want to do? Reflecting on, where do I fit in the workplace? What is my unique value proposition to the world? And well, I think what happened is I had my quarter life crisis. And this is the new thing that I've actually been teasing my students about this. Like, if you guys don't get it together, you're going to have your quarter life crisis. Because it's like you get told this, like you go through the program, you're a good student, and then you're going to have this job that's just handed to you. And that's just no longer the case.
Yeah. No, you got to work for it. You got to have the skills, and you got to know how to find the jobs. You got to know how to market yourself better than anybody else. It's not an easy market, especially like we said, for that first job. But then once you're in the club, it's a great club to be in, because the demand or the talent supply shrinks, and the demand for people who have that experience is way up. So, but it's that hard thing. How do I do the first one?
So you mentioned something about networking in that. Do you have any thoughts on networking?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, think like you brought up Albert, who's building his own brand. And he's done a fantastic job of it. And like you said, like he networked with us. Like we talked with Albert, he talked with so many people, and you feel like just from all that work he was doing building a brand, you felt like you got to know him even before I talked to him face to face. I felt like I knew him, I liked him, I got what he was about. And that's what ended up landing him employment, right? And that's not everybody wants to do that, build a personal brand, start networking with people. And if you're willing to do that and put in that effort, and it's real work to do that, it's not like snap your finger magic beans to get a job, right? It's this is real effort. If you can do that, you will stand out, because not everyone is doing that, right? So, and he's an example of a standout.
Well, so I've got a question. So would you say Albert's personal brand lined up with the reality of how Al talked to you and carried himself?
Yeah. Absolutely. I only paused. I was like, where are you going with that?
I was like, yeah, did you get to know the real Al? He's terrible. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's you're probably going towards the importance of being authentic and, trying to create a brand that's comfortable and a good version of you, but you at least.
Well, actually where my mind's going right now is towing the line between, do you market yourself or brand yourself as who you want to be or where you're at? Because like, I think that you can kind of that saying, fake it till you make it. Like, because for example, I see a lot of people who have no experience, but they're putting SQL tablet, like the skills they're learning in their tagline on LinkedIn. Like, where do you think the line is between being an actual imposter? I know everyone struggles with imposter syndrome, being an actual imposter and being just that person who's being ambitious and putting that kind of forward thinking momentum out.
We tell people to start marketing themselves right away. Like as soon as you complete a project, put it out there and share it. You can always replace it with better projects as you continue to get better. But having some stuff out there is better than nothing. I tell students not to put the like hopeful analyst, aspiring analyst, that type of thing. And just say data analyst. Like that's what you are. You haven't landed the job yet, but like, this is what you're going to do. this is what you're excited about. So I tell people to do that as well. Sort of like you said, fake it till you make it. But just, trying to project to the skills you have versus being so focused on the title that you don't have yet,
Right, because I think that's where imposter syndrome comes from, where you're perceived in a way externally that you don't perceive yourself internally. And that's where kind of that friction or that angst or anxiety comes from.
Yeah.
And I mean, I saw it with Molly where she got this job. Like she struggled with it, where it was like, I am so stressed. But 6 months later, she's like, wait a second, I could be making a whole lot more money. I've got the skill set now, and I have the title, and I have the experience. So it's like watching kind of that transformation of feeling like you don't belong there, struggling through it, and then getting to a point where it's like you've hit a new, I don't know, plateau, a new level point where it's like, this is who I am now.
Yeah. And I often talk about it as, an employer wants to hire you for having all the skills they want on the job already, right? But if you only took jobs like that, you wouldn't grow very much. You would just be doing the things that you can already do versus like I felt personally that the roles where I've grown the most are when I was in over my head, and I had to figure out how to learn these new things. And so I often tell people kind of look for roles where maybe you are really good at certain components, but it also has a thing that you don't know yet, because that's the thing that you might be interested in growing into. And, focus on selling the employer on your amazing skills in this one area. And, oh, by the way, I watched YouTube videos to change brake pads. I can learn anything. That's the type of person I am. Don't worry about this other part. Like, I'll pick it up just like I picked up all these other things.
Right. Well, I do kind of want to issue a word of caution in that I recently took one of those Big 5 personality tests. So I'm moderately low in neuroticism. If you are moderately high or very high, you may want to kind of be a little bit more grounded in your path forward, because it is very mentally, from a mental health standpoint, it's very taxing and draining. Because I have been like launching that consulting agency and being in meetings with CFOs and being like, I don't understand this part, but what I think it is, you don't ever lie directly, but if you don't know something, you don't necessarily have to broadcast that out.
Don't highlight it.
Yeah, you can go back and figure it out quietly afterwards.
Yeah.
But then it's like you may not be able to figure it. That's where the kind of tension and the stress comes into play.
Yeah, and it probably depends on what the thing is in the specific context. I think there's a certain competence and confidence that can come from saying like, oh, I'm not sure about that, but I will figure it out. Just very solid that I know I don't know everything, but I'm confident I will get there, and I'll get you an answer to that. So I love when I hear that from somebody. And the opposite that I hate is when I see somebody talking very confidently and I know more than they do, and I know they don't know what they're talking about. That's an ender for me.
See, those people are fun, because then I like to see how far they'll go with it.
Yeah.
just poke the bear a little bit. See how.
Yeah. You're like,
what is the limits of this delusion here?
Yeah. So that's a tough one, because then you never can trust when they tell you what they think they know what they're doing, right? So I like the other way a lot better.
Right. Yeah. And I think that your career is a series of iterative games. So you're going to have this first job, and then depending on how well you do, how your relationship to your manager, you might get a promotion, or you might have to go find another job. I think the one thing that is important to maintaining that like forward momentum within those iterative games is having integrity. So you don't want to scam people. I mean, you could maybe scam people, and it's a really good way of optimizing potentially money in the short term, but it doesn't get you. You're not going to build a life around that. Yeah, you're not going to make a long-term stable income around being a fraud.
Yeah, your personal brand is tremendously valuable in the long run. My current job, I got because of relationships I had with my two partners right now. Previous job I got because of a relationship. You know, if you're seen as somebody who has that integrity, works hard, is a fun person to work with, as you go down the road, people will be reaching out to you, and you don't really have to work as hard to find those opportunities because you've built a good brand with people you've worked with.
Right. I mean, and also too, you've gone from entry level to mid to senior, and there's just more demand for that out in the marketplace. All right. Well, we've been rattling on for about an hour.
We're good at that.
No, I enjoy these conversations. I mean, it's
definitely.
been a while. It's been like multiple weeks since I've had one of these long form conversations with another analytics professional. You have any closing thoughts?
No, I mean, came here to talk a little bit about the boot camp. I will say for people who are trying to learn this stuff, you don't necessarily need to buy a course. If you feel comfortable researching it all on your own, you could go to YouTube. If you can hold yourself accountable. For folks who do want some been there, done that pros to sort of hold your hand through the entire process, help you market yourself, make some personal connections to our network and help you get jobs once you're through it. We do have this boot camp that we're launching March 2nd. Right now, we're in this discount period where we'll give people 25% off tuition. If you miss that period, if you mention this podcast, we'll honor that discount a little longer. And you know, if you're thinking about it, just it's mavenanalytics.io. Up in the top nav, there's a button that says Learn, and you'll see the Data Analyst Bootcamp in there. You can check it out, read up on us, and even ask us any kind of questions you want. And would love to talk to you about it. Awesome.
Well, John Pollard, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy the conversations, and you know, looking forward to the next time we chat.
Yeah, me too.